Deep Space Nine's got an incoming ship, and Kira's not chuffed. Hardly surprising, as the species in question, Valerians, sold material for weapons to the Cardigans while they were squatting here. It's not quite that simple, as the material in question also has other uses. If Kira can prove it's sufficiently refined to be weapons grade, Sisko can do something about it. Until then, he says he has to let them dock, which again raises the question of just who gets the final say on this Bajoran-owned station, but let's ignore that for now. We'll have to ignore it anyway, as something's kicking off in ops. A Klingon ship's coming back through the wormhole, and a month before it was due. We try to call, but they don't pick up on account of it having just kaboomed. Somebody managed to teleport off just in time though, and after a bit of fiddling from O'Brien, we get them safely on board. Safely is a somewhat relative term, however, as the guy has been put through the ringer. He declares victory and then promptly carks it, which I'd say probably makes it a draw at best. We're having a meeting to try and figure out what the hell just happened. The dead Klingon was all kinds of messed up, and Bashir's doing a science to figure out what weapons were used on him, the results being expected shortly. Their official mission to the Gamma Quadrant was a biological survey, but unless they met Triffids, that's probably not what they were fighting. Dax and O'Brien will pop over to the debris in a megashuttle to look for the black box and see if it has any clues, once Dax has finished having an odd fit of the giggles anyway. I'm sure it's nothing. In the meantime, life goes on. Well, not for the Klingon, obviously, but those Valerians have turned up, and a little earlier than Kira was hoping for. She tries to stall them while she checks their flight plan, only for Sisko to overrule her and grant them docking clearance. Her little investigation will have to be done on their schedule, not hers. To Odo, who's in Quarks, he's trying to learn more about the Klingon ship from when they docked here before going through the wormhole, and, after some minor threats, learns the crew of the ship said something about bringing back a weapon or some such. Bugger all of that, though, as Odo has a bit of a funny turn where he does an impression of the T-1000, then collapses, leaving Quark running for Bashir. Odo wakes up in the infirmary, which is largely a formality as Bashir doesn't know his biological makeup from a mushroom omelette. Such is the problem of being the only example of your species, I guess. There's no reason to stay, and Odo feels okay now, so Bashir lets him go, but not before a bit of an odd chat where he says he thinks this Valerian thing will boil over, causing Sisko and Kira to come to blows. Curious behaviour, but I'm sure it's nothing. Maybe he's onto something after all. Kira thinks she's proven the Valerian ship is carrying weapons grade whatever and wants to go sort them out. That was the deal after all. Sisko, however, is altering the deal. He doesn't seem at all asked about this whole thing anymore, instead focusing his attention on what looks like a large tablet. And her pressing the matter causes him to bristle with implied threat and force her to back down. Those factional lines are present elsewhere, too. The megashuttle carrying Dax and O'Brien has reached the debris field and started having a poke. That all becomes somewhat secondary when O'Brien, out of the blue, says he thinks Kira has been a bit too uppity of late towards Sisko. Dax is initially non-committal, and somewhat passive too, until O'Brien starts talking about loyalties. That has Dax referring to sides as well, and that she's on his. Finding the black box ends their discussion, but if things carry on the way they're going, maybe they'll be too busy fighting to check the contents. We've got that black box recording up and running, though only in part. The logs speak of mutiny and subterfuge and everybody generally murderizing the shit out of each other. It also says something about telepathic energy spheres, which seems like a topic worthy of discussion. Not to Sisko, though. He doesn't care about any of this and just wants people to leave him alone. That seems more than a little out of character to Odo, as does the behaviour of others around him. Whatever's affecting them doesn't seem to be touching him. To Quarks we go, where Kira's talking to Dax. She's trying to gauge where Dax's loyalties would lie if things went pear-shaped, something she did earlier for Odo, too. For her part, Dax is acting very disconnected and spending most of her time reminiscing. Even an admission from Kira that she plans to overthrow Sisko whether Dax is on her side or not gets no reaction, at least from Dax. Quark knocking some stuff over suggests the conversation wasn't as private as Kira would have liked, and she gets a bit handsy before throwing his stunt double at the back of the bar. That's a bit lawless even for a habitual dodgy git like Quark. Odo becomes very interested when Quark tells him about overhearing Kira's plot, and in turn shares his concerns about the others. There is one plus from this, though. It proves Odo isn't the only person acting normally. If Quark was affected, he'd either be offering to sell guns to both sides, or finding the best place to hide, rather than talking to Odo about his grievance. Regardless, it's time for a chat with Sisko. Or not, as Sisko isn't in his office. He instead finds O'Brien behind the desk, with Sisko being kept in his quarters, where, in O'Brien's words, he's safe. We've got some more of those Klingon logs recovered, and the one he's listening to mentions those energy spheres from earlier, along with the desire to kill the captain. A little infighting is normal for Klingon ships, says O'Brien, apparently unconcerned by the complete lack of survivors. He's more worried about Kira and the inevitable grab for power she's going to make. Odo can see he's not getting anywhere with O'Brien, so visits Sisko's quarters, which are now protected by guards. Sisko is, if anything, of even less use. Odo's concerns that whatever happened on the Klingon ship is being repeated here are waved away. Tell it to O'Brien, he says. He's far too busy designing this wonderful clock. How appropriate, as he can use it to measure what little time he has left. Kira's waiting in Odo's office, and after saying she's locked down that Valerian ship, just in case we'd all forgotten about it, admits to Odo that she plans on going after Sisko and O'Brien. Under her rule, Odo will be able to serve justice however he wants. Of course, she can't tell him her plans just yet, but she trusts he'll make the right choice when the time comes. Sounds like we need to let someone outside of Deep Space Nine know what's going on. Unfortunately, that's already been thought of and prevented, Kira locking course to Starfleet and O'Brien cutting off contact with Bajor. That leaves Odo to do all the heavy lifting, so we'd best get as much data as we can. Those Klingon logs are as fixed as they're ever going to get, and a poke through them finds something interesting. One speaks of those telepathic energy spheres we've heard mentioned a few times, only this time we learn what's on them. Apparently they're a record of some sort of civil war for an alien race, one which caused them to become extinct. Things are about to come to blows. O'Brien's heard that Kira's going to make a play for power, and Sisko wants every Bajoran on the station arrested. Learning that the Federation is outnumbered doesn't please him, and neither does the idea of leaving. O'Brien's got a plan though. All they have to do is get away on that Valerian transport Kira's got locked down, and they can come back with ships and take the station for themselves. Odo had best hurry up then. He visits the infirmary and finds Bashir doing some definitely not dodgy stuff with a Bajoran before advising Odo to choose a side soon. Odo's not here for career advice though, and wants to know if the dead Klingon had anything weird going on besides his injuries. Bashir confirms as much, a problem with his brain stem, and one that could have been caused by psychic shenanigans. Odo lays out his idea that people here have been affected by the same thing, and he thinks it's everybody who was in Ops when the Klingon teleported over. Except you, Bashir, obviously. You're perfectly normal, not like the rest of these nut jobs. Besides, controlling whatever it is inside people's heads might be the key to who wins the upcoming ding-dong, so it's in your interests to find a way to stop it. That'll make you a hero to whoever comes out on top, after all. It might be too little too late. The Bajoran that Bashir was talking to has snuck whatever he was given into Ops, and tries to stick Sisko with it. A warning from O'Brien gives Sisko a chance to knock the guy on his arse, and O'Brien doesn't have much patience for Dax trying to warn Kira either, so I guess that answers which side she chose. Sisko going to town on the Bajoran lad means he doesn't notice Kira arrive until she poops yellow in his general direction. It's not a perfect ambush though, as Sisko and O'Brien teleport away. They were trying for the Valerian ship, but fail, a force field from Kira preventing them, which means they have to get there on foot and need some help. The only person who can provide it is Odo. He points them at a cargo bay, and they comply, after taking off their comm badges so they're harder to track. Kira sees they aren't moving and guesses what's happened. Force fields being lowered is unexpected though, and she thinks she knows who's doing it. A terse call to Odo confirms as much, but he says it's to help her rather than them, which is why she'll find them trapped in a cargo bay as a gift for her promotion. Bashir compliments Odo on how well he's playing both sides before saying he's finished setting up a science thing for the cargo bay. It'll force out whatever psychic shenanigans are going on in those affected for as long as it runs, and as Bashir isn't affected, there's no reason for him not to come and watch. Sisko and O'Brien have realised they've been screwed. They don't have long to fume over it though, as Kira's turned up with Dax and another Bajoran. As Kira's about to deliver the coup de grace, the door behind Sisko and O'Brien opens. Odo and Bashir run in, and Odo triggers the science what's-it Bashir made, causing a high-pitched whine. Everybody except Odo grabs their heads as purple fog is squirted out of the top. Once out, they're sufficiently back in control to listen to Odo when he tells them to grab onto something while he opens the outer door of the cargo bay. The purple brain fog is ejected into space before Odo closes the door, and we all agree not to think too hard about things like how quickly the lost atmosphere of the cargo bay would need to be replaced in order to avoid sudden decompression from such a large opening. It's all over and things are getting back to normal. The purple brain fog dissipated in space, which might mean that it's gone forever or could result in affecting thousands of ships and planets, but that's not our problem, so bugger it. Sisko is polite enough to gloss over the whole mutiny and attempted murder thing, which is very gracious indeed if the people aiding Kira weren't in ops when the Klingon teleported over. Probably best not to think about the implications of that, so we'll leave him marvelling at the weird clock he built instead until the next adventure. Before we get into it, we've got a bit of an elephant to address. One of the logs we recovered mentioned finding those energy spheres on a survey looking for planets to colonize. But we heard prior to that from Quark that they were retrieving something to make the Empire's enemies tremble. I initially thought it could have been a Wayland-Yutani situation, a ship sent on a dangerous mission but unknown to most of the crew. That doesn't really check out, though, when these boasts came loudly and from multiple Klingons. The log in question can't have been a prior survey from the same ship, as it said they were returning with the spheres, and the idea that they were sent out with only the rumour that there was something very important there doesn't gel with either a colony survey or this guy being so nonchalant about finding magic brain balls. Quark's report could have been just idle boasting by the Klingons, I guess, but if it was pure fabrication to save face, it's improbably close to the truth. And if you're bullshitting to sound hard, why mention that it was a bio-survey? Try as I might, I can't make these two contradictory pieces fit in a cohesive narrative. If you have better luck, do share it with me in the comments, won't you? My desire to clear it up is because, other than that sticking point, this was an enjoyable episode. Newly free Bajorans bristling at the perceived slight of being mothered by the Federation is a good starting point for some friction, especially when it comes to settling some scores. Waiting until they had proof that the Valerian ship was carrying weapons-grade gubbins might be the fair option, but it's understandably not the one favoured by those who've been on the receiving end of what they're accused of carrying. Telepathic possession, then, lets Kira voice some legitimate grievances that have been bubbling away for a while. The question of who ultimately has the most say here is wrapped up in some very complicated political manoeuvring, something of a departure for a person who's spent her whole life just shooting at problems. That yearning for a more simple life is reflected by her offer to Odo. With me running this place, you'll be able to do what needs to be done. If you want to toss Quark out on his ears, toss him out. If you want to proclaim martial law on the promenade, proclaim it. This station will be yours to protect, with no interference. That's the word to sum it all up then, really, isn't it? Interference. For all of the potential gains it brings, it's still hard not to see a Federation presence as just that, interference. The adjustment might be better for her and her people in the long run, but it's still far more frustrating than when she just had to pull a trigger. Before we go, there are a pair of new entries in our series of What is Odo explorations, something we've been doing for the last couple of summaries, so I guess it now qualifies as its own thing. The first is that Odo appears to be largely immune to psychic shenanigans. We can infer his collapse was him rejecting whatever happened to the others, though we don't know if that means his immunity to telepathy is naturally weaker than Quark's, or if this particular instance would have done the same to a Ferengi. Regardless, that tells us he's probably not going to be affected by anything to do with head meat in the future, which makes sense when he doesn't have any. Come to think of it, I wonder if the immunity is partly why Lwaxana was so interested in the last episode. The second is a bit more tenuous, but we're going with it anyway. In this shot of Bashir tending Odo in the infirmary, we can see what we can probably assume to be a readout of his biobed as Bashir was analysing it. This suggests that despite not having a digestive system, as we learned last time, he does have some form of cardiovascular system, or at least something that gives a reading very similar to an electrocardiogram in a human. For the sake of argument, I suppose it could be a standard human readout at the bottom for comparison to whatever Odo's got going on at the top, but the difference in gradation on the graphs suggests they're different things. If you're comparing readings, then it's logical that you keep the same points of reference. What does all this mean? Who knows. Maybe it's a byproduct of emulating humanoids. Maybe he needs it to cycle new, fresh goop into surface areas that are tired from the act of mimicry. Maybe that's just a standard thing he does even in liquid form. Or maybe it's entirely unrelated to a circulatory system at all, and he's just dreaming of a drumbeat while he's unconscious. Hell, it might not even be him, and his goop is just registering Bashir's heartbeat. Am I massively overanalyzing a stock animation for infirmary biobeds? Of course I am. But it's in the show, so that makes it fair game, and let's be honest, massively overanalyzing things is precisely what most of us are here for. End of episode.
Any news on the legal stuff to get us out of here?
Nothing firm, but as there are only 2 more episodes of the season left, I suspect we'll be out around 4 videos from now.
4?
Season summary.
Oh, forgot about that. I don't know why it bothers with those. You know somebody's just going to ask him where the next episode video is instead.
Were I willing to give it some thought, I might attribute it to having established a fixed way of doing things. Neurodivergence and all that.
Sounds like an excuse to me.
Of course, there's always the possibility that he just does it to troll people.
Oh, well that's fair enough then, really. Woof.